Bali, the island of the gods. For decades, it's been the world's go-to fantasy of what paradise looks like. But if you look a little closer these days, you start to see the cracks. The incredible beaches are struggling with plastic, the spiritual calm is being drowned out by traffic, and the very culture that draws millions of people in, well, it's at risk of being sold off piece by piece. Today we're going to explore the paradox of Bali, a paradise in peril, and a sanctuary fighting back from being loved, literally, to death.
So, here's our game plan for today. We'll kick things off with a huge clash between the dream of Bali and its really tough reality. Then, we're going to dive deep into the island's unique spiritual soul, before rewinding the clock to see how history turned it into such a cultural fortress. From there, we'll look at the tourism boom that changed absolutely everything, tally up the massive cost of that boom, and finally, we'll ask the biggest question of all: can this paradise actually save itself?
Okay, so let's start here. On one side, you have the tranquil, spiritual haven that the whole world dreams about. But on the other, you've got the reality: gridlock traffic, polluted shores, and just overwhelming crowds. This is the central conflict of modern Bali, where the promise of paradise is having a head-on collision with the consequences of its own fame.
And this is the fantasy, right? This is the powerful idea that's been sold to the world for years. A quiet sanctuary, offering solace. It's a promise of escape, a chance to find something pure and untouched. And honestly, this dream has been the engine of Bali's popularity, drawing in millions of people who are all searching for this exact feeling.
And then there's the reality that just shatters that dream. 33,000 tons. Just let that sink in for a second. That's how much plastic waste floods Bali's beautiful waters every single year. This one staggering number shows us the core problem. Our search for paradise is paradoxically destroying it.
Now, to really get a handle on the crisis Bali is facing, we first have to understand what makes it so incredibly special. It's not just about the beaches, it's the island's profound spiritual foundation. There's a reason it's called the Island of the Gods, and trust me, that is not just a marketing slogan.
At the very heart of Bali is something called Agama Hindu Dharma. It's a form of Hinduism you literally can't find anywhere else on Earth. It's this unique spiritual blend, weaving together Hindu gods, ancient animist beliefs in nature spirits, and even Buddhist philosophy. It dictates everything from art to architecture, and it's not just a religion. It's pretty much the island's entire operating system.
And you know, this practice looks very different from its roots in India, where some forms of Hinduism are really focused on sacred texts. Bali's is intensely communal and visual. It's lived outdoors in these amazing open-air temples called puja, and you see it every single day in the intricate handmade offerings called kanang sare, which are placed everywhere to maintain harmony with the spiritual world. It's a faith that is constantly practiced, together, right out in the open.
And the philosophy that underpins all of this is called Trihita Karana. It translates to the three causes of well-being. And it's basically the spiritual blueprint for Balinese life. The idea is simple but so profound. True happiness requires harmony in three directions: with the divine, with other people, and critically, with the natural environment. Seriously, if you understand this one concept, you're on your way to understanding everything about Bali.
And check this out. This chart just shows you how much of an outlier Bali really is. In Indonesia, which is the world's largest Muslim-majority nation, Bali is this tiny Hindu island in a vast sea. Almost 87% of its population practices a faith that's shared by less than 2% of the rest of the entire country. Which of course leads to the big question, how on earth did this happen?
Well, that question takes us right into Bali's incredible history. How did this one small island manage to hold on to its unique Hindi-Javanese identity while the entire archipelago around it was completely transformed by the arrival of Islam?
Okay, so this timeline gives us the highlights. After the early settlement, the big turning point comes in 1343 when the powerful Hindu-Javanese Majapahit Empire conquers Bali. This kicks off a cultural fusion that really culminates in the Majapahit Exodus about a century later. This unique culture would then face its greatest test during the Dutch conquest in the early 1900s, which led to the tragic Bupatan, a ritualistic fight to the death, where Balinese royalty would literally march into Dutch gunfire rather than face the dishonor of surrender.
But let's zero in on this one event, the Majapahit Exodus. In the 15th and 16th centuries, as Java's great Hindu empire began to collapse, its entire court, we're talking priests, artists, royals, scholars, they all fled across the sea to Bali, and they brought their entire civilization with them. This wasn't a conquest. It was like the transplanting of a culture. They essentially turned Bali into a living museum, the last sanctuary for a civilization that had all but vanished from the rest of the region.
So for centuries, Bali remained this unique, kind of protected cultural sanctuary. But in the 20th century, a whole new chapter began, one that would see the island discovered by the outside world, transforming it from a preserved sanctuary into a global spectacle.
But here's something you might not know. Bali's image as a paradise wasn't an accident. It was actually a deliberate marketing campaign. After their brutal conquest, the Dutch colonizers needed to whitewash their image. So they rebranded Bali as this exotic, peaceful living museum. They manufactured the fantasy we know today, specifically to attract Western tourists and, frankly, to paper over their own atrocities. And wow, did it work?
And this quote from environmentalist Iwayan Suardana just nails the shift perfectly. The first visitors were mostly artists and anthropologists, people who were drawn there by the culture. But what came next was something totally different. The island went from hosting a relative few who came for the culture to being completely overwhelmed by a flood of mass tourism. A flood that now threatens to consume the very thing it was built on.
And this brings us to the really tough part of the story, the severe, multifaceted consequences of Bali's incredible success. This is the heavy price that paradise is now paying.
Let's start with a hidden crisis: water. The tourism industry alone drinks up 65% of Bali's entire water supply. And as this chart shows, a single tourist can use up to 4,000 liters a day, while a local resident uses just a tiny fraction of that. The result? The island is literally running dry to fill hotel swimming pools and water golf courses.
And it's not just the water, it's the land itself. Every single year, 700 hectares, that's an area larger than 1,300 football fields, are paved over for new development. A lot of this is ancient rice paddies, part of the Subak irrigation system, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This doesn't just threaten Bali's food supply, it severs that connection to the environment, which is a core part of their entire philosophy.
But the costs go way beyond the environmental. Culturally, you've got commodification, where sacred rituals and dances get turned into hollow performances for tourists. Socially, there's the absolute nightmare of traffic congestion. We've all seen those viral videos of blatant disrespect at sacred sites. And economically, a huge chunk of the profit just leaks out, benefiting foreign investors or companies in Jakarta, while the Balinese community is left to deal with the social and environmental burden.
And this powerful quote from a local entrepreneur really captures a feeling that's growing on the island. That legendary Balinese hospitality is being strained to its breaking point. You can feel a rising sense of frustration and a demand for respect. A powerful call for visitors to remember that this is not just a playground, it is their home.
So, after seeing the scale of the problem, the question becomes, what now? And that brings us to our final section. Bali is at a critical crossroads, and a lot of people are asking if this incredible island can actually navigate its way out of a crisis that its own success created.
Well, the good news is Bali is fighting back. The government is now rolling out a whole series of crucial measures. There are new tourist taxes to help preservation, a ban on new construction in the most crowded areas, and much stricter punishments, including deportation, for disrespectful tourists. At the same time, they're overhauling waste management and trying to ease the pressure by promoting other Indonesian islands.
But look, these individual steps are all part of a much bigger vision. The ultimate goal here is a fundamental shift away from the model of mass tourism. It's a push towards a more sustainable, community-focused kind of tourism that values quality over quantity. In essence, it's an attempt to realign the entire tourism industry with that core philosophy we talked about, Trihita Karana, restoring that sacred balance between people, nature, and the divine.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering question. For centuries, Bali was a sanctuary, a unique cultural island, forged and preserved by a remarkable history. The challenge it faces now doesn't come from an outside conqueror, but from its own global fame. Can this island, which has survived so much, save itself from the consequences of being loved to death? The answer to that will define the future of paradise.